The ones that get it right are the ones that they're good stewards. I used to have clients that were multi-millionaires, retired by the time they were 55, and were getting it right, like you mentioned. But it's not like they made, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 a year. They had just started and stuck with that through the ups and the downs. And it's amazing when you look at those calculations over 30 and 40 years, how much you can have. And then the other thing I would say is how they're getting it right is like they're typically like very driven and focused on things that matter.
Okay.
And they are really they're really concerned about giving back.
Welcome to BeyondU, a podcast from Oklahoma Wesleyan University that explores faith, culture, and higher education. Honored today to have Trevor Shakiba on the podcast with us. Trevor is an OKWU alum. He's been a board member at the university. He's been involved in financial planning and wealth management and commercial real estate. It was a joy to have him on the podcast today to talk about some important things like just the value of Christian education in today's society and how as parents we can make decisions around some of those highest priorities for us like faith and church and things like that. And Trevor will also engage some questions about just the economic realities and the challenges that exist today. So hope you enjoy this. Again, Trevor Shakiba on BeyondU. Well, Trevor, I want to welcome you to the OKWU BeyondU podcast. I know your history here at OKWU has taken on different shapes and forms over the years. You were a student here, you were a student athlete. I think we're still waiting to hang your jersey up in the Mueller Sports Center.
You're waiting a long time for that.
But you've served on the board, and in this particular visit, you're here to receive the President's Award at our one of our fundraising events tonight. So I just want to say welcome to you again, and thanks for coming on the show today. Talk to us a little bit, Trevor, just to get us started about your connection to the university as a student and maybe how that's grown over the years.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation. Christine and I are honored to be invited back. It's always fun to come back to Oklahoma and, make that drive from Tulsa to Bartlesville. The campus is always different and changing and improving, so glad to be here. Starting at the beginning, I was thinking about this on the flight up here. My connection to Oklahoma Wesleyan, there is none. Mm-hmm. There is absolutely none. And this story is so random / providential, which is how I would frame it now, because I don't have any connection to the Wesleyan Church. I had never heard of Wesleyan. I had never heard of Bartlesville Wesleyan College at the time. And so out of high school, I still had my eyes set on playing sports. And so I actually went to a small, I think it was a Division II school in Miami, Florida for my first semester. For many reasons, that was not a great fit for me. I think that was in 1999. Came back to Houston and went to junior college for a semester. And, I had become a Christian probably, I think, at 16. So I was still very new in my faith. And I remember that I walked into a Barnes & Noble. And I was looking for Christian colleges. And I found a book. And that is how I ended up at Bartlesville Wesleyan College. I narrowed it down to 3. I applied to multiple universities. And I narrowed it down to John Brown, Oral Roberts, and Bartlesville Wesleyan College. Visited all 3 with my mom. And I ended up here not knowing anyone. And so, it's very, very odd. I was telling Christina about it, how, you hear people talk about how, God's story, that is a God story to be back here and to think that I served on the board and just there's zero connection.
Yeah, in those 25 years, from student to being on the board and now receiving an award, what was it for you when you looked at those schools? This small little place in northeast Oklahoma, and we've heard this story over and over again, but what separated Bartlesville Wesleyan, now Oklahoma Wesleyan, for you when you were looking at schools to attend? What was it that made the difference here?
Yeah, I wanted somewhere where the faith component was going to be there, right? Obviously the sport, I still wanted to be able to play. I thought I was going to be able to play and do something magnificent. but it was also the fact that it was small and the people were welcoming. Even Oral Roberts was kind of overwhelming, which is odd because the high school I went to in Houston was one of the biggest with, I think, 4,000 people. My graduating class was 1,000. And I don't know, looking back, why like Texas A&M or the University of Texas weren't options. But again, I think you look back on your journey and it's like, there was God in those moments, even though I didn't realize it then.
Yeah. Yeah. So you graduated here, and then, since then you've really moved into the wealth management and financial planning. So talk to us just a little bit, Trevor, about what that journey has looked like for you. How did you get into what you're doing now?
Yeah. So again, a very circuitous route, I guess you would say. I majored here in business and minored in math. And, back then we didn't really have a whole lot of degrees. So it wasn't like there was an economics degree. So that was my way of trying to formulate a business and math investment type of degree. But it was, professors that I had back then really invested a lot in myself. And so, to be honest, after I graduated, I applied at the direction of Dr. Terry Arnholt to Oxford. And he set that up with someone that he knew here in Bartlesville that was a former CEO of Philips. And I thought I was going to get in, but I was summarily rejected with like 2 or 3 sentences. I still have the letter. And then it was like, what am I going to do? I got to find a job. I couldn't move back in with my parents. So I just started applying for things. And again, landed at the right firm at the right time. Back then it was American Express, and just went to work in the financial advising industry. And, things really took off from there.
Yeah. Yeah. You and your company, and we'll talk about your foundation here in a minute, but have experienced providential success over the last several years. So I mentioned you and Christina, your wife, who was in here just a few minutes ago, the foundation you started, that really seeks to kind of emphasize Christian education. Tell us a little bit about your foundation, Trevor, and some of the heart behind what you and your wife do through your foundation.
Yeah, so that's something when we sold our investment firm back in 2019, it was something like, what can we do to make an impact with organizations, churches that are aligned with our beliefs and mission statement, but do it in a way where it's in perpetuity, right? And so that's how that came about. And so we just try to partner like Oklahoma Wesleyan or the Christian school our kids go to in Houston called Bay Area Christian with organizations that are going to make an impact for the kingdom. Mm-hmm. About as simple as I could put it. Crisis pregnancy centers and Pine Cove, which is a Christian camp that does a phenomenal job down in Texas and across the country that are going to make a lasting impact for the kingdom.
So how old are your kids right now, Trevor?
8 and 5.
Okay, so they're not yet for college yet, right? They're not
Right.
quite ready. But obviously, hearing you talk, the value of Christian education is kind of in the DNA for you and your family when you talk about what you do and what you're passionate about. So even, for the parents who are listening here, how are you and Christina talking with your kids about the value, the role of Christian education and how important that is, even for them at their ages?
Yeah, and this has been a journey as well. I went to public school, and Christina went to private school. And so for the longest time, I was pretty dead set on public school. And based on the last, 10 years, probably longer, things have changed so drastically in that space. Especially, and now look, everybody has a different opinion. This is a lightning rod topic, but this is a podcast. So let's really get it going here. But it depends on where you're at too, right? On what kind of schools are available to you. One book I would recommend is Kingdom Education by Glenn Schultz. If you haven't read that, I'd recommend every parent read it because it goes to the heart of the matter. And I guess for me, it was, as Christians, we believe the author of all truth, like everything good comes from a transcendent source, God. Mm-hmm. If we're going to talk about education, why are we willing to capitulate and and not have that in the center of everything, including education. And then, look, some of the things that are going on now are just so mind-boggling. And I think for me, the last straw was like the biological reality of male and female. If we can't get that right, then how can I trust in the secondary or primary to put my kids in a place like that? And then for that, it was like, we are going to go this route with the Judeo-Christian worldview, and everything else is going to come from that, and we're not going to compromise. Now, with that being said, there's a cost, right? There's a cost, not just financial. And I think in recommending that book, it became really clear that that cost, by any means necessary, when you're dealing with your kids and trying to raise them up a certain way and instill these values and make sure that they're fantastic contributors to this world, but you're also dealing with something like eternal. And when you think of it that way, in that framework, you have to do whatever it takes to keep your kids and prepare them for all the things that are going to come their way. And that starts with Christian education. I mean, it starts in the church and, of course, with the parents, where our role is to disciple them. But they're at school a significant amount of time. And so I've kind of gone on a lot of tangents here and rambled, but that's how we look at it.
Such good advice. So if I could just drill down for a minute, for you and Christina, or maybe for the listeners here, what are some of those costs? Because, to value Christian education, whether it's a monetary cost or a popularity cost, but what are some of those things that you have factored in, you and Christina, or you would encourage our listeners to just be aware that the value of a Christian education is significant, but some of those costs to consider in the conversation, in that decision-making process?
Well, obviously the first one is financial, whether that's at a higher, like college, but also K through 12. But with that being said, now more than ever, there's so many different ways that you can make sure that your kids have that framework, right? Whether that's a co-op or charter or a private Christian school, homeschooling has just unbelievably exploded. And beyond that, you've got scholarships and so many, like our school, Bay Area Christian, partners with a lot of different organizations and kids in any number of ways, right? So that's number one. Number two, look, they may not have as many resources. That's just a fact.
Sure.
And they may also not have as many sports programs,
right?
And so you've got to be aware of that. Now, it's come a long way from when I was at Clear Lake High School, right? So that was a learning for me, because I had this perception of private school and homeschool that is totally incorrect. And now the resources there may have actually superseded many public schools. And of course, popularity and different things, right? There's without a doubt, TJ's on a soccer team, and it is foreign to them and to the parents that, we don't have them at this other school because the soccer programs are so good. But I think going back to what you said, Ben, is like you've got to figure out what is the most important thing, or what those 2 or 3 things are. And then you just got to draw a line in the sand and say, look, we cannot compromise. We will not compromise, because this is the most important thing. And for Christina and I, it's that, TJ and Maya, know the truth from us. We know it's our role. That's number one, the church. But we're going to hit them in every possible way to make sure that they know where truth begins and ends. And again, you're talking about something much more significant than a soccer team or even academics. You're talking about theology and eternity.
Yeah, these things that are eternal,
right?
Transcendent. Yes. So is this something that you as parents, do you actively talk with your kids about this as you make these decisions and talk about the importance of church and Christian education? I mean, what's that conversation like with your kids at the age that they're at right now?
Yeah, we do, and we've gotten a lot of great advice from mentors and pastors. We look, we're not perfect. Let me start there. We're very far from perfect, but we've had a lot of people go before us, and in our church that have helped us significantly. And there have been very difficult decisions. Here's one, and maybe it wouldn't be that difficult, but again, going back to sports. Sports were a big part of my life. I think competition is important, having to compete, persevere, win, lose, all that. So again, we're doing the soccer thing. And as you know, it gets very serious very quick. That may be good or bad. So anyways, they have a soccer tournament. It's in Houston. It's not like we had to travel anywhere, but it was over Easter weekend.
Yeah.
So we had a game on Good Friday. We had a game on Saturday, and the championship game, get this, was 9 a.m. on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And looking back on it, the decision is so clear. But I struggled with it, right? Maybe we could go to the game and then go to church. And this is where Christina came in, being the, level-headed balance for me. It was like, we're not going to do that. And we had pushback on it. Every other kid participated except for TJ. We didn't participate in that tournament. And it goes back to where are we going to draw the line? What are our principles? And we've got to stand on those.
Yeah.
And we had to explain that to TJ.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that goes for any other type of soccer stuff, because it's, they have stuff on Sundays, and it's like, if we're at a tournament, we try our best to go to church in San Antonio or here or wherever we're at. And that's actually led to some phenomenal church experiences too that weren't a normal experience, because we've been to some other fantastic churches.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so wise to talk about, sitting down to look at counting the cost, right? Every decision that we make and every priority that we establish, it might cost us something, but having those conversations with a spouse, with a kid, really matters quite a bit for prioritizing what's most important. So for you, Trevor, I mean, the whole value of Christian education, you are a product of public education, as am I. But, we went to school together here. Talk to us a little bit about the role that a school like Oklahoma Wesleyan has played in your own life, and how Christian education has shaped you, in these several years that you've been a part of Oklahoma Wesleyan.
Yeah, well, look, from the faith perspective, again, I came here being an extremely baby Christian, right? I was not, which was a great experience for me in, interacting with people like yourself, where your father was very involved with the Wesleyan Church, but I was meeting pastors' kids, people that were in the Wesleyan Church, and went to church camp their entire life. And I mean, I'm trying to figure out where Job is in the Bible, right? So
is Hezekiah a real person?
Yeah, I mean, and then taking Old Testament and New Testament, and it was a great experience for me. But also just like the repetition of going to chapel, right? I don't know back then if it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or how exactly it worked, but I heard like a variety of speakers. But it was also in my business class and my math class, praying before class, right? Or being on the basketball team and, praying before the game, or addressing certain issues from a biblical standpoint. That helps, even though I didn't get it right all the time, nor did I get it right, nor do I get it all right now, but especially after I got out of college, because it wasn't a straight line in sanctification.
Sure, yeah,
right?
It rarely is, yeah.
It was ups and downs and peaks and significant valleys. But when you have that knowledge, you eventually know what is right and what is wrong, and you can recenter yourself, is how maybe I would explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit. So, whether it's the elementary school level or high school, we've talked about the value of Christian education, but also the cost of it, right? So, we talk here at Oklahoma Wesleyan that being here as a student is an investment. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of people here who it is a significant investment. But we also know the financial return. In fact, I was just talking to students the other day that I think right now the earning power of an undergraduate degree from a school like Oklahoma Wesleyan is between $2 and $3 million over a lifetime on average. Okay, so there's a monetary return, but talk to us a little bit about sort of the I don't know if faith return is the right way to say it, but the whole experience, not only from the financial investment, but the spiritual investment and the power of a school like this to shape students. Can you just kind of speak to that for a second, Trevor?
Well, I mean, look, if you have taken 18 years, and I guess I'm mainly speaking to parents here, if you have taken 18 years and done everything you possibly can to raise your kids in a specific environment and teach them, these principles that we know are true, right? Why would you then at 18 hand them over to an environment that is riddled with potholes, landmines, and everything else, and in some cases is actively working against the worldview that you have shaped them with? Whether that's philosophy 101 with a professor that's intent is to eliminate their belief in God, or everything else that's going on in the university setting that we're like actively seeing right now with Israel and Hamas and some of the just absolutely mind-blowing things that are coming out. I can't even imagine that. And to me, again, even though there's a cost, would I pay $10,000 more or whatever the financial figure is to still get my children a first-class academic education within with a biblical worldview, and save $10,000 to go to a state university and potentially lose them in some capacity forever? That is a pretty straightforward decision to me.
And that's part of the cost that we talk about on the other side, right? So it might cost more, even a little bit, to make the investment in Christian higher education, and yet,
Yeah, and let me add this, right? Because it's not like it's one or the other either, right? So one of the things I did for a long time until I sold my investment firm was I ran an internship program with Oklahoma Wesleyan University where I'd have business students come down every semester, including the summer. And one of the things I found there was I actually preferred these students. Now, of course, I was getting some of the best of the best, but I also had interns from other universities. And typically a student that has actually thought and been challenged and had to reason and thought through the most important questions, which everybody should be thinking about, like origin, purpose, morality, destiny. I found them to be superior to any other interns that I had from some of the biggest so-called prestigious universities that everyone's heard of. So I always like to put that out there. Like, it's not, hey, they're going to go to this smaller university, but they're going to have to go to chapel, and, that's going to be okay. But like the academics, or they're not going to be on par. That's not true at all.
Sure.
Not today. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a hypothetical situation, kind of along those lines. If your son's Trevor, is that? Or I mean, you're Trevor. What's your son's name?
Tobias.
Okay,
he goes by
Tobias.
TJ. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say TJ came to you at 18. Let's say he's graduated high school. He comes to you, says, "Dad, not sure about college. I'm kind of interested in just making money right now, and I think I just want to get a job and not worry about going to college." How would you talk to him? How would you kind of guide him in that conversation, Trevor? If he came to talk to you about something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of context there, right? I do think specific universities, it's more than just getting a job, academics and being prepared to get a job. I think there's a lot more that goes into maturing, especially for boys from 18 to 22 or 23. So it would just depend. What job, son, are you looking to work at? Mm-hmm. There's no doubt that having a degree is a net benefit, and prepares you not just academically. Because looking back at Oklahoma Wesleyan, did that prepare me to be a certified financial planner? Not really, not in the like sense that I was ready to advise clients, but I had grown significantly in that time. So, I mean, but with that being said, if he's not academically ready or just not college, we would have to have a long discussion about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the interesting things in this economic climate. We'll get to that here in just a minute and pick your brain on some advice you have. But where you can go to, anywhere right now and get a job for $25 an hour. But I mean, kind of this post-COVID economy that we're in, for so many people, the value of education has been diminished, right? But we don't know how the economy is going to shake out in the next few years. And so that's part of why I asked the question is just, the economy is one place right now, but we don't know. And one of the things that we talk about is the value of education over time is significant as far as the return on that, And so it's one of the things we take into consideration or talk about a lot. So if you were talking to parents who are out there listening, and maybe they got boys and girls who are thinking about college, what advice from kind of the financial side, Trevor, would you give them just about planning for Christian higher education and some of the costs? If it's 529, what advice would you give people who want to invest in that way for their kids and make that a priority for them?
Well, the first thing is to start as soon as possible, right? And I probably have to say this disclaimer is I am no longer a financial planner. I guess I'm still a CFP, but I'm not licensed. And so whatever the disclaimer is, we'll let your tech people put that in. Like, it's not specific advice or whatever. The key to investing is time. Yeah. It's really two things. It's time and having the ability to save. And what I used to always advise people, especially young parents, is, it's never too late to start, but the sooner you can start is where the magic happens with compounding interest. And start with anything. $25 a month, even though that may sound insignificant, the starting part is the key part, right? So that would be number one. Number two is, find an advisor. If you have no idea what you're doing and it's not something of interest to you that you're not going to educate yourself on, you need to find a fantastic Christian, preferably certified financial planner and put a plan together. Because what I found a lot, Ben, when I met with people initially is like they knew they needed to do something, but they ended up doing like a whole bunch of different things, and they did some over here, and then they started something at their company, and someone told them about a 529, so they did the 529, but it wasn't working cohesively together in a plan. So that would be the second thing. So get started. You got to live below your means, and put a plan together would be number three.
Okay. So let me pick your brain a little bit, Trevor, just on the kind of the current state of the economy and your read on this right now. So like, it seems like all these narratives coming our way that we're in recession, we're not. There's a recession coming. So just give us your general take on where we are in the economy right now. I mean, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? Not that I'm asking you to prognosticate and tell us the future necessarily, but just what's your read on where we are right now?
Yeah. So the things that I love to talk about would be faith, apologetics, real estate, investments in the economy. So I'll be like, we can do another podcast and just talk about the economy. Where are we? So here's the thing, right? It's like, are we in a recession? Well, it depends on who you talk to. If you're someone that's been affected by inflation and you're having difficulty buying groceries, yeah, we are in a recession, right? And that's the other thing people forget about is inflation has been a big problem. Especially last year, it was 8.5%, 9% by some measurements. It's actually much higher. And now it's come down as the Fed has increased rates substantially in a period that we've never seen before, right? But don't forget that inflation compounds. So if you're buying groceries, it doesn't mean that it's gotten cheaper. It means that it's not going up 10%, it's going up 4% now. But that 4% is compounded on that 10%, which is compounded, right? Yeah. So it's like things are 25% more expensive. My opinion, disclaimer, once again, is we're in like a period that we've never seen before. And that is absolutely true, because we've never seen a period where we went through a complete health pandemic where we printed 40% of all available dollars and then experienced inflation because of all the money that's sloshing around the economy. And now we've increased rates 500 basis points, 5%, in the quickest period we've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So is there going to be economic hardship, a recession, and calamity ahead? In my humble opinion, yes.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Sure.
Right? Now, how that works itself out and when, I have no idea. But I can tell you this. If you want to buy a house right now or a car, you're financing it at 8.5%. 18 months ago, it was 2.5%. And so I personally just think we're on the very beginning part of that recession, and jobs and some of these other things that a lot of people like to look at just hasn't quite happened yet.
Sure. Yeah. So what I hear you saying then is it's going to take some time to kind of to have the full ramifications of what's happening economically to come, and we don't know how or when any of that's going to happen, but this is going to be a lingering issue for quite a while.
Well, just, the economy is the economy is gigantic, and it's like if you think of it as the largest ship possible, and you're turning it, it takes a long time. This isn't like a speedboat, right? And it takes a long time for money to get into the economy and then work itself through. And then on the opposite, as we've increased rates and they've started to decrease or take money out of the system, that takes longer than what people would expect. And so be prepared.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I talk to students a lot, and they're like, this whole concept of cryptocurrency and is this a wise investment? So again, I'm not asking you, I know we got the disclaimer about the CFP for you, but give us your take on cryptocurrency as far as an investment strategy for people long term.
So look, I am not a crypto guy. I'm a Bitcoin guy. So whatever the terminology is for that, Bitcoin only, Bitcoin maximum, whatever. Here's my take on that. If you look at every currency from the very beginning of time until now, it has eventually been debased, which means that, like if you look at Rome, they had a specific percentage of gold in their coins, and then they started to decrease that gold. And it's kind of similar to what's occurring if you look at what the value of the dollar was and what it is now. And then what I always encourage anyone, students, Dr. Weaver even, is like to ask fundamental questions and challenge your thinking. And to me, those two questions would be, what is money? Like, think about that. What is money? Well, we just always grow up and think, oh, well, it's a dollar, the United States dollar, and that's what it is. Yeah. But it historically hasn't always been a dollar. It's been seashells, it's been rocks, it's been, all these different things. Sure. And then the other question that I started to really ponder is like, why do we need inflation? Why is inflation good? Even when it's 2%, do we have to have inflation? Like, why is that a good thing? And so this is the thing that I like about Bitcoin, is that it's the first money that's been invented that's digital. It solves a gigantic problem, which is the transfer of money, and then you don't need an intermediary or a third party for it, right? It eliminates that trust problem. It's decentralized, and it can't be corrupted. And I'm probably missing other things. Like, I'm not a Bitcoin expert, but that's what I like about it. And so I'm a pretty big bull on Bitcoin, but only Bitcoin.
Okay. Not crypto. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So if we take the long-term look here, Trevor, on the economy, and again, we don't know how things are going to shake out. We don't know if recession's coming, if it's here. There's just so many narratives out there. But one of the things you mentioned earlier is kind of looking at the long term, right? So even though there's so much instability in the market right now, what is some long-term advice that you would give to people to think more long-term strategically about what they're doing with their money than just the immediacy of what's taking place right now?
Yeah, well, look, the enemy of a successful financial plan is going to be emotion. Same thing with a long-term successful investment, whether that's real estate, stock market, or cryptocurrency or whatever. So what I always advise clients was like, you just, number one, you've got to expect that there are going to be ups and downs. And if you look back at the history of the United States stock market, like you can come up with every type of reason to sell and panic and, hide your money in a mattress. But long term, you've got to be optimistic. Long term. That doesn't mean you're not going to experience bumps along the way. But you have to, going back to that plan, if you have a financial plan in place and it's clear what your financial goals are, which typically mean you need a time frame and an amount. Like my kid's education is in 15 years and we need 100,000, 200,000, or I want to retire by the time I'm 62 and I need 10,000 a month. Well, now you can plan for it.
Sure.
And so when we go through a recession or the stock market's down 20% or whatever, you want to put out there, you're not as apt to panic. And that's what I saw. That was the biggest problem in advising clients. It wasn't any of the other issues out. It was themselves and their ability to manage their emotions, to be emotionally competent. And that was difficult.
Yeah.
Frankly, the biggest thing I probably did to help all of my clients through the last 15 years was just helping them walk back from whatever cliff it was at the time and not sell because you cannot time the market. Even everything that I just told you, right, with my investments, it doesn't mean I'm selling because I have been wrong, I will be wrong, and I absolutely could be wrong this time. And there's no way to figure out when to get out and when to get in. And, there isn't a bell, there isn't this magic bell that rings at the bottom for you then to go back into the whatever investment you're looking at.
Yeah.
And usually the bottom is the worst, like the absolute worst. Think about COVID when the market bottomed. How could you have predicted what was going to transpire with COVID and the market and how quickly that was going to recover? Market was down 35% in something like 30 days. And I don't remember exactly, but it was like 4 to 6 months the market had recovered and set an all-time new high. Talk about trying to time the market.
Yeah, who would have seen that coming
that
on
would
both
have been
sides,
a
right?
disaster.
Yeah. So then, again, thinking back even 5 years ago, who would have thought this global pandemic and just what it would do, even to the economy. And so looking forward, there's really no way to know exactly what's going to happen. But what I hear you saying is kind of take the emotion out of it, right? And find a certified financial planner who can help you navigate the ups and downs with wisdom and all aligned towards goals, right?
Yep. You got to find the person that is going to sit across the table from you that you respect, know, call them a friend, hopefully is aligned from a faith perspective, because you're going to have tough conversations.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So in all of your experience, what do people get wrong when it comes to financial planning? Like, what are some of the things that, in your opinion, like people just get it wrong, or if it's emotions or whatever else, that it just kind of just sidetracks them from heading the direction that they really want to go long term?
Oh man.
we won't
How long
name
do we
names.
have?
Yeah.
In America, we struggle with having too much, meaning it's very difficult to not get caught up in our society and what success is defined at from a secular point of view, right? Even for Christians,
Sure.
Myself included. And so you end up trying to impress people that you don't know and maybe not even like by making poor financial decisions in things that are temporary, whether that be homes or cars or clothes or whatever. The biggest mistake I see, I'll give you two for younger couples or people and older, is they try to buy too big of a home too soon, and then that becomes a weight around their neck that is very difficult, very, very difficult. If you're paying almost, however much of your paycheck just for this really nice house because you grew up in a nice house with your parents, it's difficult to save money and start. Remember what I talked about? You got to start soon,
early,
right?
Yep.
As soon as possible. The biggest mistake I see, so that would be number one. And of course, not planning, like putting a plan together. Even if you don't have a lot of money, having a plan is critically important. The other mistake I saw in people that were starting to look towards retirement or retire is they always think they need less money than what they do. So they would come to me and, let's say they're living off $8,000 a month right now working. And they would say, oh, my kids are, out of the house. I just got the last one out of college. And we probably need like maybe 4 or 5. And I would always tell them, you are wrong. You need 100%, maybe more of what you're currently living on, because you're not going to be working. You're going to have all this time on your hands and you will find ways to spend money. And that was always the case. So you've got to be realistic, have a plan, and make sure like your plan is only as good as the inputs you put into it.
Yeah, you can make a plan, but you got to stick with it. Yeah. So kind of on the other side of that, then the conversation, because I'm sure you've worked with people who have significant amounts of money, but there are also people that I know too that haven't made much money, right? Mm-hmm. But they've been financially successful because they've, for whatever reason. So we talked about mistakes. And I think one of the lies that we live with a lot in our society is, and you mentioned this, is I've got to have more. I've got to have a bigger house. I've got to keep up with. Mm-hmm. And so we start to throw all this money towards things that we don't really need. Okay.
Yeah.
But for those who you've seen over time, regardless of what their income actually was, who have done it well, what do you see in them? Right. So we talked about how people get it wrong. Yeah. How do people get it right on the other side of that?
Well, the ones that get it right are the ones that, again, to me, this goes back to a biblical mindset, right? Because it does talk quite a bit about money in the Bible. Is they're good stewards, and they've done it for a long time, and they've educated themselves, or they've partnered with someone that has helped them along this path. So they've started, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you save and then invest. I always like to add that last part because it's not just about saving. Sure. You've got to invest and make that money work as hard for you as you've worked for it. And so, I used to have clients that were multi-millionaires, retired by the time they were 55 and were getting it right, like you mentioned. But it's not like they made, 2, 3, 500,000 a year. They had just started and stuck with that through the ups and the downs. And it's amazing when you look at those calculations over 30 and 40 years, how much you can have. And then the other thing I would say is how they're getting it right is like, they're typically like very driven and focused on things that matter. Okay. And they are really, they're really concerned about giving back.
Yeah. And so that whole conversation then about being aware of the things that matter, right? And making decisions based on what matters most to you. One of the things you and I talked, I'm kind of coming full circle here, but one of the things that you and I talked about earlier in our conversation, Trevor, is this whole, we talk about costs, we talk about decision making, and we talked about as Christina as parents, talking about like sports and church and this whole relationship. So when it comes to some of these material things and making decisions, why do you think that people chase these more socially acceptable things, the bigger house, the sports instead of church, the secular school instead of the Christian school? Like, why is it that you think people chase these things instead of prioritizing maybe the things that they should in their life? That's a big question, but can you speak to that for a minute?
Well, I think it's because we're fallen and sinners, ultimately, right? And I think when you look at the world and America as a whole, what do we lack? Well, we're not as much of a community as we were, right? We don't go to church as much as we did. Like, we're just so susceptible to all these other things that, matter, but they don't really matter, right? So again, I think it just comes back to your priorities. What I found is that if, I don't go to church, and we don't go to church, and we miss church for even a couple weeks, like, it is so easy all of a sudden to be drifting into that category of like, why am I focused on these things that don't matter? You would be amazed if like you turn the social media and TV off and you just focus. That's where I think, to answer your question, like I think that's a big part of it. It's like we're so focused and addicted to technology and social media, which I'm certainly guilty of, that we're just like missing all of the really important stuff, which when you think about it at the end, it's kind of like your faith, your family, and your friends.
Yeah, and how many people get to the end of their lives, retirement age, and wish they could go back and, reprioritize or change the decisions they made, because chasing those things in the moment seemed valuable, but in the end, it wasn't as much. Right?
Yeah, and you want to achieve, right? And especially in America, achieve and success and win. So I think going back to your point about Christian education is important. Like, where are they going to get that?
Yeah. Well, I want to honor your time, Trevor, and if I could just ask you one more question here as we kind of wrap up. Congratulations to you and Christina again. You're receiving the President's Award this evening at our Foster Bonanza this evening. So OKWU is a place that has been meaningful to you. I mean, for 24, 25 years now, which you and I are not that old. But what is it that excites you about the future of Oklahoma Wesleyan specifically? What is it that, you've been a board member, you've been a student here. What excites you about the future of Oklahoma Wesleyan?
Well, I think we've got great leadership. I think that was the case when we were here. And then it was funny, I was joking about this. Like, when I left, Dr. Piper was coming in, and I told him, like, all you really needed was for me to leave, and then things really took off, and we had a great turnaround, and now with Jim, and so I'm excited about that. I think it's more clear than ever that places like Oklahoma Wesleyan that are committed to a biblical worldview, the 4 Ps, and teaching within that framework are desperately needed. And, what I used to, as a board member, tell everyone was like, if you're marketing to Christina and I mean, I would never send TJ and Maya to insert whatever prestigious university that is. I just wouldn't. I don't care if it was Ivy League or not. Like, that is completely out the window. Would I send them to Oklahoma Wesleyan? You bet. Because I think even more so now than when we were here, the resources that are here, the business school, again, I know it firsthand because I was getting those students in my practice, and I hired 2 of them full time. One of them to be a financial advisor, and one of them to actually run the entire practice. It's like, that matters, right? And I would be thrilled to send them, TJ or Maya, into the business school and like let Dr. Weaver run them through his Dr. Weaver thing and put them in front of people and talk. They have to do speeches, and again, it all stems from a place of like truth and love and goodness, and it originates from there. So like you got the first and main thing correct.
Right.
As a parent, like, to me, you could get everything else right, so-called, and, have the great band and football and all this other stuff, but like, you don't get that right, the
rest of it doesn't matter. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that OKWU tries to do is to keep in front of us what is it that matters most, and let's make decisions about what matters most to us. And so thank you, Trevor, for your time today, for the role that you've played and continue to play in the life of Oklahoma Wesleyan, and congratulations on the President's Award, and thanks for coming on the show today.
You bet. Thank you.